little story about Bobby Boriello, who was a Gambino soldier and a big money maker for the Gotti family and the Gambino family. What you want to call it, the Gotti family or the Gambino family? It never did become the Gotti family, did it? Much to John Gotti's chagrin, I'm sure. Anyhow, this is going to be the last one for the month of January. I'm going to take some time off. I'm going to take a little vacation, and I've been working pretty hard at doing my books, and I've done a couple of books, a New York book and a Chicago book, and I'm getting set for the next year, doing some other things this next year. So I'll get back to putting one out at least every week at the last of January. I know the one, I've already got it set. That we're going to come back into, like, I think the last Monday or Sunday in January is going to be a guy named Mark Black who was in the penitentiary in Springfield, the hospital, federal hospital down there, with John Gotti and some other guys, and he got all embroiled in some mafia drama, carrying messages from one person to the other. And so anyhow, it's a really interesting story. It'll be a great one to come back to. So I hope you guys all had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I'm not very good at wishing people all that kind of stuff before I forget about it. I just put out podcasts. That's all I do. You know me. I'm just a plain guy. Come on back in February. Hey, all you wiretappers out there. Glad to be back here in the studio. Glad to have you in the studio with me. This is Gary Jenkins, retired Kansas City Police intelligence detective and now podcaster, as most of y'all know. If you don't, why, keep listening. You'll learn who I am and what I'm about. I have a lot of fun doing this. Going back to New York today, guys. Going to Bobby Boriello. Bobby Boriello was a Gotti guy, if you remember right. He probably is one of the trigger men on the Castellano hit. Now, going way on back, he grew up in South Brooklyn. And he grew up in a neighborhood that was dominated by several mob families, Gambino, Genovese, and the Colombo crime families. He was surrounded by mobsters from the time he was a little kid. His younger brother, Stevie, was close to Crazy Joe Gallo and Albert Gallo and Frank Iliano. Steve played a role in getting Gallo's crew really ensconced in South Brooklyn and their rackets down there. And he brought Bobby in, and he was a big kid, and he got a reputation pretty quick as an enforcer within the Gallo gang, but he moved on beyond that. Now, between 1967, 1972, his rap sheet grew considerably. He was arrested 6 times, from weapons possession to assault, larceny, gambling, the usual stuff, No matter what, he didn't go to jail, and his criminal career advanced. Didn't go to jail. Bobby Borrello didn't go to jail because he became important to different mafia guys, and they got those political connections. By the 1980s, he will become a made man in the Gambino family. And what's interesting is Mikey Scars DeLeonardo will talk about being inducted by Sammy the Bull Gravano with Junior Gotti, and because John Gotti did not want it to look bad, did not want he to make his own son. He didn't think it looked good. Bobby Borrello will be inducted in that same ceremony with Mikey Scars and Junior Gotti. He really will have strong ties with all these guys: John Gotti, Sammy the Bull, Nicholas and Jojo Carozzo. Borrello will be seen with Gotti quite a little bit. They were like friends. They'll spend weekends on Long Island, gambling and partying and going to performances and just, general social things as well as the business. Bobby Borrello conducted most of his business as he got, after he became a made guy at the One Over Golf Club. It was in Carroll Gardens in New York. It was a social club. It was operated by a paraplegic gangster named Joe Pitts Corneliaro. This dude was involved in loan sharking and gambling. He'll eventually be killed. These guys, there's constant danger surrounding them. Constantly, they're in danger. During his early years in the Gambino family, and even before, he was suspected of being involved in more than one murder. That gives him a hell of a reputation out there. Other criminal activities are the usual extortion, loan sharking, and drug trafficking. And, he really had a good, solid status within the Gambino family. He could take care of business. He could make money. He could do what needed to be done. And, the Gambinos under Gotti, they didn't mind dealing. They didn't mind taking that drug money. He was also part of Junior Gotti's crew when John Gotti promoted his son to capo, and Sammy the Bull wanted that done for some reason. This crew had some guys, Jackie Caballo, Charlie Cornelia, Tommy Twits Cassiopoli, and Dominic Fat Dom Borghese. He was involved, all over New York City, and particularly South Brooklyn. Worked with Anthony Toto, Anastasio, and some other guys like that. He was involved with eventually become involved in the trucking, construction, loan sharking, because that's what Gambinos do. They were in trucking, construction, and loan sharking, as well as gambling and hijacking and all the usual things. Late 1980s, he got into the world of strip clubs. Like I noticed in Kansas City, they did the same thing. Later on, they started getting into strip clubs. There was a guy named Steve Kaplan who was paying tribute to him and Junior Gotti for different strip clubs all up and down the East Coast. So he really, and Mikey Scars was involved in that one down in, extorting money from that one down in Atlanta, Georgia. So these guys, really reached out with their strip clubs. As he rose up in the ranks, his most powerful ally was Junior Gotti. And he was actually, Junior Gotti named him a boss over some other guys in his crew. And in December 1990, after John Gotti Sr. was indicted, he created a 5-man ruling panel over the Gambino family, and Junior is part of that. Bobby Boriello, is operating alongside of him and operating his rackets out of this Brooklyn social club. John Gotti ordered Borrello to eliminate a guy named Louis DeBono, who was a Gambino soldier who had gotten a really lucrative contract to install fireproofing foam in the Twin Towers. After DeBono's death, Borrello takes care of Louis DeBono. Sammy the Bull, takes over that business, and kind of a lot of tensions in the family over that. Borrello tried to kill a Genovese crime family associate named Preston Geritano in Brooklyn on the street. The hit failed. It led to like a kind of a negotiation between the Genovese and Gambino crime families, which they do that. And in the end, Geritano was allowed to live, but he can't try to get revenge against Bobby Boriello. Borrello's luck will run out April 13th, 1991. Killed him right in front of his house in Bensonhurst. Now, go figure that one. That's not really, but guess who did it? It wasn't a Gambino that had this done. It was a Lucchese, a big Frank Lestorino, shot him twice in the head and 5 times in the body. That Anthony Gaspipe Casso, ordered this. He had gotten the information from his NYPD officers, Louis Eppolito and Stephen Caracappa, about where to find him. They had done a little surveillance on him, knew where he lived. He was just getting into his 1991 Lincoln Town car. Wife Susan, their 2 children, were inside the house, unaware that their husband and father had been killed just outside. When he was killed, he was under investigation by multiple federal agencies and the Kings County District Attorney's Office for this cocaine trafficking conspiracy and for his suspected role in the murder of Paul Castellano. A guy named Dominic LaFaro had identified Bobby Borrello as one of the shooters. And he also has claimed that Bobby Borrello was one of the Gambino's family's most accomplished hitmen. So this guy was a bad dude. He was a lifelong career mobster, came up under Joey Gallo, which, that makes sense, and lived the life. He lived the life. Wonder if he'd be running a podcast today if he'd gone in and then came back out. It doesn't seem like guys run a podcast, but who ever thought Sammy the Bull would run a podcast? After Bobby Borrello dies, his brother Stevie Borrello has been a gangster all along with the Gambino family, and he's managing loan sharking and gambling extortion rackets in Brooklyn and Staten Island. And he's still, to this day, he's out there doing the deal. So Bobby Boriello, he had a life in the Mafia that was, really typical of a guy that came up in the family, stayed in the family, whatever family he was around, and died in the family. You know, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. This is a place, a life where loyalty is important, power is important, and betrayal intertwines in around all this loyalty and power. So you just never know what's coming next, and very few escape. Either they spend the rest of their life in the penitentiary, they go into witness protection, or they get killed. Hardly anybody goes on the shelf, as they say. So that's the story of Bobby Borrello, a Gambino soldier who was a moneymaker and an important guy to John Gotti's rise to become the boss of the Gambino family. Thanks a lot, guys. And you know, I like to ride motorcycles, so watch out for motorcycles when you're out there. And if you have a problem with PTSD, be sure and go to the VA website if you've been in the military and get that hotline number. And if you have a problem with drugs or alcohol, you can get a hotline number off of Anthony Ruggiano's website, another Gambino guy. He's in not in witness protection, but he's out of the game now, and he's a drug and alcohol counselor down in Florida. You maybe go down there to Florida and be in his treatment center, however that works. Let me know if that ever happens. Don't forget that I've got a book, Leaving Vegas, about the wiretaps that we ran in Las Vegas and in Kansas City to uncover the skim. I have a couple of movies about Kansas City mob activities, Gangland Wire, and Brothers Against Brothers, the Savello Spiro War. You can rent them on Amazon. And keep coming back. And don't forget to like and subscribe and tell your friends about us, and get on my YouTube channel or my Facebook page. I got a lot of people on it. We have a lot of interesting discussions. Right now, I'm building on YouTube in the community tab. I'm learning all kinds of stuff here in the community tab. We're now building our second fantasy family. We built one between New York and Chicago. Who would be the boss, the underboss, the consigliere? It's just a fun thing that we do. And now I'm doing the three Midwest families: Cleveland, Kansas City, and Milwaukee. Who should be out of those three? Who would be the best boss? Who would be the best consigliere? Who would be the best underboss? Who would be a good capo? Come on back, guys, and we'll have some more fun with the Mafia. More fun with the Mafia.